Hello and welcome back to our LifeMark study through the book of Revelation. Today we're looking at chapter 17. Lots of imagery in this chapter, a lot of symbolism, and a lot of important concepts to be taught. This vision that John is having now he's really coming up on the end of everything. This vision is really setting the stage for the final battle. It's setting the stage for everything that we so often think of when we think of the 7 years of tribulation. We think of the false prophet, the Antichrist, a false religious system, a system of idolatry and worship of the Antichrist. We think of a one world government, a one world economy. Many of these things are found in this chapter. And it begins with this great prostitute. Now, you know, prostitute indicates sexual immorality, but in the Old Testament, it was often used as to indicate that people had committed adultery against God. And ultimately, that's what idolatry is. It's the worship of someone or something other than God. And so when we look at the great prostitute, we see that she is a symbol of this great idolatry against God that humanity has participated in since the fall. She sits on many waters, which represents many peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. All of the people of the earth are involved in her idolatry. The kings of the earth have followed after her, which means that the leaders of nations have led their people into this false religious system that we see here. They're all participating in it together. In verse 3, we see John is taken up in the Spirit into the wilderness and continues to see his vision, and he sees the beast the prostitute sits on, and this is the beast that rose in chapter 13. And this represents the worldwide political system that the Antichrist uses to exercise control of the world. And so we have the great prostitute, this great one world religion, representing all of the worst things about mankind and his idolatry and rebellion against God, sitting upon this beast which represents the political system. So you have a marriage of church and state, an unholy marriage of church and state through which the Antichrist is exercising control of the world. We see here this golden cup filled with the filth of adulteries and this contaminants that come with a licentious lifestyle. This false church has led the world into the worship of the Antichrist and has caused them to drink from the cup of idolatry and licentiousness. So this is a horrific system leading to gross sin, and it's really beyond our ability to comprehend just the effects and impact of this system, both the religious system and the political system upon the world. It's going to be a totality of control and debauchery unlike anything that humankind has ever seen. And we see that the prostitute is drunk with the blood of the saints. She has been a persecutor of the church. And John sees this woman in her unfaithfulness and her blasphemy and her rebellion, and he is just astonished by what he sees. And that's something that often happens to us, isn't it? We're oftentimes astonished. We marvel at the sin around us and the sin of lost mankind and how they revel in it and how they pursue it and how they love it. And John sees all of this in the vision that he has, and he is astonished by this. Now, the beast itself that we see in verse 7 is the Antichrist. And the Antichrist comes to power, is killed, rises from the dead, and astonishes the world with his invincibility. He was, and that is that the Antichrist lived, and he made a treaty with Israel during this time, a 7-year treaty that he ends up breaking. And then he is not, and that is to say he is killed, and then he rises from the dead from the bottomless pit. And so as a result of his resurrection, he astonishes the people. They are wowed by him, and they follow after him, and they worship him. We see the 7 heads on this beast, and these are identified as 7 mountains. And They are then further identified as 7 kings and represent kingdoms. And most people believe that Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and a future kingdom are represented here. And that future kingdom is the one identified with the Antichrist. And he was and is not and then is again. So he is a 7th king who reigns during the tribulation. And as he rises, he is in a sense an 8th ruler connected to that pre-resurrection 7th kingdom that he ruled. And so the Antichrist exercises his rule. The 10 horns represent 10 kings or 10 kingdoms that are a part of a confederacy that are affiliated with the Antichrist, and they are means by which politically he is controlling the world. And they make war against the Lamb. All of these kingdoms, all the kingdoms of mankind, all the peoples of the earth join with the Antichrist to make war against Jesus the Christ. And he defeats them, and he defeats them with his speech, with his words. Why? Because he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And so they can not even begin to hold a candle to him. He is the only Almighty. He is all powerful. And so he has come against them, and he defeats them with his word. Just as he spoke the world into existence, he speaks their defeat as they come against him. And the prostitute is then destroyed, we see later in the chapter. And that is this one world religious system at this point. They rebel against it, the political system and the Antichrist and the kings. They all rebel against her, and they destroy this false church and this false religious system that they used up to this point. They no longer have a need for it. They already have the hearts and minds and lives of all of the people of the earth, sufficiently so that they don't believe they need this false system anymore that they've been using. And so it is destroyed. Babylon the Great is what we see here. And Babylon the Great is the culmination or totality of all idolatry that we see throughout human history. And you know, idolatry is something that we all need to be on guard against, because it has a very subtle way of worming its way into our life. And just as the enemy is going to use this false world religious system, false church, and idolatry found therein to control the masses, Satan wants to worm his way into our life in many subtle kinds of ways in order to entice us to an idolatry. Even sometimes we miss it. We are not even aware that we are being idolatrous. I came across a story recently about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs, for years before his death, made an idol of food. It was a means of control. And he was always following some kind of crazy, strict fad diet. And he would say he felt great because of the diet he was eating. And he felt he had some control over his body through what he put into his mouth. Most often it was a vegan or a vegetarian kind of diet, but he had all kinds of fads as he had a really weird, sick worship of food. And we know the story that through a scan, the doctors identified that he had pancreatic cancer. And they were very concerned by that, of course, as most of the time pancreatic cancer is a death sentence, and a very soon and quick death oftentimes. But as they did a biopsy, they found that it was a very rare form of pancreatic cancer. It was very treatable. He just needed to have surgery and he would be okay. But Steve Jobs didn't want the surgeon to open his body. And he went back to his idol. He went back to food. And so he told them, and much to the horror of his wife and doctors, I'm not going to have surgery. I'm going to see if I can do something about this through my diet. And he went on a radical diet, which had little or no impact, perceivably so, against the cancer. It was only 9 months later that he began to consider a different course of treatment. And it was about a year after his diagnosis that he ended up having surgery, but it was much too late. By that time, the cancer had spread to his liver, and he would never be without cancer for the rest of his life. And 8 years later, he passed away. Passed away as a result of a cancer that was very curable when found, but he chose not to treat because he chose to go back to that which he had found control and power in for his life. Idolatry always leaves you wanting. It never can provide for you what it promises. And yet, so often we run after things in a vain attempt to exercise or have some sense of control over our lives and empowerment over the world around us, oftentimes not even realizing what we're doing in the process is just very simply idolatry. In this chapter, we see the high point of idolatry and its impact upon mankind, and we see that this idolatrous system is used in the hands of Satan, the Antichrist, and false prophet to exercise ultimate control and to lead mankind by and large to damnation. You must be on guard against idolatry. God bless you. I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week in chapter 18.